focus.
Welcome to Talkin, Maine with Tom Saviello and the bow tie boy. I actually remembered to wear it today. It's a red one because we're close to Valentine's Day. My good friend Richard Lumb.
Yes,
brother,
sir.
it's good to have you here.
Good to have you here.
You've been on a number of times, and you know, it's kind of funny how you and I have communicated back and forth with the different things that you're doing around the police and community efforts, and it's a very timely conversation because of one we just had in Wilton. So why don't you get us up to date? First, give us a little bit about your background first, and then let's go into what's going on right now about the focus going into 21st century in relation to the police forces.
All right. I had my first policing experience was Old Orchard Beach as a reserve, no training, just showed up for work. Been to Maine Maritime, so I knew how to dress properly. And my first assignment was an experienced officer who could not read or write and whose necktie would have made a great soup. But he was actually a good community officer. And then I went into the state police, 9 years. I was president of the Maine Troopers Association, the first one. And that didn't set well with the colonel, so I ended up in Old Orchard Beach as chief from 73 to 79. Got injured, went back to school, finished my bachelor's, master's, and went to Florida, got my doctorate. And then I started teaching and have had 35 years teaching criminal justice, research, all that stuff.
Wow. Now, you taught in North Carolina for a while too, right?
I was down to there for 10 years at UNCC, University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I was chair of 2 criminal justice programs. And and now I'm teaching UMA, and I still do a class in SUNY Brockport.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They asked me to come back. I'm the only one doing online for the criminal justice program.
No kidding.
Yeah. That's another story.
Oh, yeah.
I like online for a lot of reasons. So.
Well, that's great. And you've come on a couple times because you've looked at stress levels within the police departments.
Yes.
You've looked at collaboration models, and then some of that you've now built on a little bit because, and I set the preface up as you and I started before I got in there. I just went through in Wilton where we are having to do a lot of things to keep our police force in place. And those young people, many of them young, younger than I, that are in the field are faced with a whole different level of bad guys, if you will, or even not bad guys that they have to deal with that I don't understand. I mean, Heidi told us there's 340 cases we still have backlogged in Wilton because the whole place has changed. I go home at night, I don't see it. I don't see the underbelly.
No.
And then you have it where, since there aren't many employees or new police people coming into the police force, the pool to draw from is not very good, not very good, not very big. And so now you have a competition between towns, and before you know it, one town is going to increase their salaries for their policemen so much that all the others are going to go there and the others are going to have no police enforcement. So how do we work through this? And I think that's part of what you've been thinking about and some of the stresses that are on the police department.
We have abdicated to insanity in big cities, and that has leaked out. So there are no people out there who are seeing what's really happening, or they're hearing incorrect stories. So it's caused people to leave policing. And then you have some elected officials, as you are aware, who defund. Well, that's all built on a lie. At Black Lives Matter, and I've worked with some incredibly blacks, Hispanics, you name it. So it's nothing about race. It's about the process of Black Lives Matter, who have now been under fire because they've just absconded with over 60 million. Nobody knows anything. So that story came out that police are assaulting, hurting, want to kill people. I don't know any officer, and I've worked with dozens my entire career, 50 years, who want to get into an allocation. Because you get hurt.
Yeah.
So they don't do that. So what we've reached a point, I think, in society, and my 16th book, and I don't write books for academic purposes, they're applied to the field, is that, yes, we do need mental health help. We closed the state mental health facility when I was in Old Orchard Beach, putting them into facilities which we didn't have, and it's no better today. So drugs, alcoholism, mental health, social services, irresponsible parents, everything is just out there. So I like to say that if you look at the criminal justice system, legislature, passes laws and penalties, civilians. You were there
I
for
was
many,
there.
many years.
Too many.
Well, no, contributions needed. And then you have the police who have a sworn, take an obligation to enforce the laws that the legislature passed. And then it goes back to another civilian district attorney who goes to a civilian judge, civilian jury if you have one, and civilian defense attorney. So you've got this criminal justice system which people think policemen write the laws, enforce the laws, sentence you to prison, and then in the process hurt you. You know, they only got one job. And they're not mental health workers, they're not substance abuse, those are all certified people. They're not social workers. Another story, very successful in Charlotte. But anyway, so we've got police being blamed for all social issues.
That's interesting because I really hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. Their job is simply to enforce the law.
To follow what you...
What we as legislators set, and you've gone to the judiciary side, so here's the legislation, they're part of the judiciary system, but now they have to answer to that judiciary, which is all civilians that really don't have an understanding about what is actually out in the field and going on.
No, and I think it's a good system because the judiciary and the legislature, they don't just pass stuff, they ponder it, and they look at it, research it, and take the facts. Judges often make some type of ruling that it affects, like the Miranda warning. That's good. I remember the cops went, oh, well, we can't tell people. Yeah, why not? If you're not doing your job, yes, you must worry, but if you're doing your job according to the law and the elements of a crime, nothing to worry about. Tell people, why not? So that worked out fine. But we've become a society of rumor, conjecture. I don't know what. The news, the media, the media is critical. I mean, I look at what you guys do in Wilton. If I didn't have this, I wouldn't do it, wouldn't be able to. I can probably go now, but I don't know. So it's a mess, Tom, and I think it's time for responsible people to readdress it. We've been in the same model for decades, and it's past that time.
Oh, you know, it's interesting, you sent me some statistics. Let me just get this because as I was preparing for today, I found these fascinating statistics because if you ask somebody today, what is the rate of mortality or shooting in relation to the police, somebody might say, oh, it's huge because
every day.
Every day.
No.
But the rate of lethal force compared to total police public encounters equals point, and I'm going to say the point, 0.0000206%. That's what it is.
Yes.
This is incredible, trivial percent. Now, it's not trivial to those that are impacted by it, but if you think about it, you're going to have that kind of a situation. It's not a percent. And these are thousands and millions of encounters every day. But as soon as you go onto the news, it's like it happens all the time.
Yep.
But they find that one, and then that sends a story, and those that don't know the truth begin to say that's all the police are about.
It's the same thing with Congress. There's, what, 435 or 445 members of Congress, House and Senate. And they represent 330-something million people. But they have, in both parties, I think, lost sight of the representativeness. It's like I read yesterday that the Republicans couldn't have a meeting because the Democrats in power wouldn't give them a room. That's not representing you and me, and that's my issue. But police, I spent 24 years in uniform. I was very active on the street because I don't like officers to be bound in. I've drawn my gun. I've never shot at anybody. I was shot at. I was tempted to be stabbed and stuff like that. But you are trained not to just draw your gun, and it's insanity. And the police officers, and the chief in Wilton's one of them, she can talk her way out of people being crazy. And it's the person's behavior you're dealing with, everything else aside. Age, race, sex, color, skin, nothing. It's characteristics of the person.
And the mental health part is a part that has become more prevalent, I think, certainly since you were started on the force, I would think.
Oh, God, yes.
And you even alluded to it. We changed how we handle those people in the state, and that's created something different. Why don't you talk a little bit about that too, like Pineland, and that closing has created something for us?
Yes. I know in 1973 or 4 we had a young man who was in Augusta Mental Health, and he was released and with a big bag of Thorazine, which they don't use anymore, the pills, and they said take 2 or 3 a day. He started to sell them. The first call we got to him, he was running naked down the railroad tracks with an approaching freight train. The officer got there first and actually tackled him off the tracks. The train was trying to stop. Next call we got, he's doing the same thing, but the train got him. And Augusta Mental Health reacted positively. Today there is no Augusta Mental Health. And the community services are not collaborating sufficiently, and many may have the same client. That's one of the slides. But so we've got to change how we address problems. I understand people's rights. I don't have a right to come up and destroy your property or to threaten you or to do damage to your whatever. And the police are being said, well, you need to do mental health and substance abuse. The police have been, I guess they were dumped on, I'll use that term.
Yeah.
With substance abuse, they're not substance
abuse
abuse trained. That's a whole specialty. And we have agencies. I wonder where the state substance abuse agency is. I never see or hear a thing from them.
I don't either.
It should be treatment, prevention, education, all. I don't hear anything wrong. I wrote a book with probably one of the most profound experts in substance abuse interventions. His name is Gary Metz, professor at Brockport, where I was. He trains Russians, he trains all kinds of people in substance abuse what to do. So we wrote a book on the topic, and I was enlightened because he's the guy. And I said, well, how come, and he's also a deputy sheriff part-time. He said, our cops don't know anything about substance abuse. Some may be using prescription drugs,
Yeah.
and it's a mess. So we've got to change that. And we have to make people available 24/7 like the police are. If we're going to have a mental health encounter, domestic violence, I mean, you've changed the law, arrest or not. But who's doing the treatment? I got a great story that we did in Morganton, North Carolina, with a woman who did a domestic violence center. She said to me, would you go to the judge with me and we'll ask him to let us do a group for male domestic violence abusers, many repeat. I said, Lynn, you're a very assertive, I wanted to say aggressive, woman with this topic. I said, you're going to be okay with it? She said, I am, I got a plan. We never had any recidivism. The judge agreed, not everybody, but she did a class of 7 or 8 at a time. Never had another call from those people.
Because it got into the class, and it wasn't the police that was offering it.
It was her, but she had some magic. I don't know how she did it. I mean, I found her, she'd come flying in the office. I was chief at the time. And she'd sit down and she'd listen. Yes, ma'am, I'm listening. But she had a success with this. And there's hundreds of people like that.
But you need that in the force to
Or
supplement.
available to the force.
Available that they can tap into it so that they don't come back and have to figure out, how am I going to deal with that? I mean, I feel comfortable in saying this, and maybe I'm wrong, but if we didn't have as much as we had, some of these young officers would find a way that they could be educated and deal with it. But because they have so much on their back, I mean, like Farmington right now is down 5 policemen.
I know.
We're at least up to speed, or I think we got 1 opening coming up, but we're not bad shape because we have the best chief in the world. But
well, you have an excellent chief of police.
Yeah, she's excellent.
She's excellent.
Yeah,
she really is. I've met hundreds of them. Yeah.
She's one of a kind, and I'm not letting her go. But they don't have that time. So how do we structure the police force of the future? I mean, that's part of some of the conversations you started to have, and get the community involved in that.
Well, I'm also 1 foot off the cliff half the time. I'm writing a book right now. It's going to be under 100 pages, and it's a model of service model, law enforcement, mental health, substance abuse, social needs, one agency regionally. And big cities are a mess. I don't go there, but Maine's set up with 3 or 4 big cities, and a place like Franklin County could have this agency, and it would be cost effective. It would have sufficient people to do all the things you have to do. You'd have a person for mental health, he'd have some staff, or she'd have staff, substance abuse, whatever you need for social issues. They would be in this agency. They would work together, collaborate. The sustainable community collaboration is not being done, and it's expensive. All these separate silos of service, and maybe the same client. My wife, who's a therapist, had one client couldn't talk to the other person who was dealing with the family, and Paula was dealing with one of the members of the family, couldn't talk to the other therapist, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous.
I said that, and she said, well, it's the law, so, okay. But we need to, if we're gonna provide services, we need to make them available. Sheriff at this county, good man. I don't know what you think of him, don't care,
I
but
think Scott and I are good
Scott,
friends. Yeah.
he's been hit with, the Board of Visitors, which I was on for a while, and we need Narcan in the jail, and then this, mental health, and a lot of needs, but his budget doesn't allow him to do that. But there are agencies that he's partnering with, making a difference. Bring them together, talk together. I've got Richard Lumb in my jail, he's got this issue, we can help. So we've got to figure out how to do that.
And if you do that, Richard Lumb, when he comes out, or Tom Saviello comes out, he is better prepared to be a citizen back in the community again, and not recidivative and come back into the jail, where he's just the cycle just continues itself.
Oh, yes. And we provide post-jail services. The judge can do that, because if you don't, the guy leaves, or mostly guys, they leave and they go right back to the same behavior.
I don't know anything different.
I know. We've got a good commissioner of corrections. I know Sheriff Liberty, now Commissioner of Liberty, well, Command Sergeant Major in the Army in Fallujah, so he's really got a wide experience. He is a humanist. He's doing things in the state prison system to do exactly what you said. Get people, change the behavior. If we don't change the behavior and help them get there, they go back to what they were.
Yeah.
And the whole criminal justice system, there's an enormous, complex slide on that.
Do you want to go up to that slide?
No,
no.
I don't think I'd send it, maybe not.
Yeah, okay.
That's not paid for by the criminal element. It's paid for by you and I
and
and these guys who pay taxes. So we support a huge system of police, courts, corrections, all, and we don't contribute to the need for it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because you're right, we do contribute, but if we don't fix it, though, we're going to contribute more, because we're just continue to pay it.
Yeah.
And this example I give is back when I was doing Medicaid Expansion. I wanted to have it so that when that person came out of jail, most likely he at least dried out in jail.
Yes.
So when he comes out, he's got an opportunity. But if there's no place, no resource for him to go to, or her, he gets into the car with their buddy, they go off, buy a six-pack, and the next thing you know, 3 months later, he's right back where he is
back,
again.
yeah.
But if he has the ability to get counseling, and he doesn't have to worry about how he's going to pay for it, for that short window, you break that pattern, and now he's got a chance to move on with what he does.
I've got a class in Brockport, and it's on community corrections, and I like that topic. One of the students was saying, well, we need to not put people in jail because it will save money. I said, you're missing the point, nicely. And my whole point is that 68.7% of people who go to prison recidivate, get back into prison. So 2/3 of the people plus, we've failed. We've failed to change anything. That can be fixed.
I know back, and this is years ago when I was doing that, in Washington, they actually had data that they had reduced it by helping the expansion program because of the health, and that it had made a substantial respect on that thing. I know that you talk about, and this is, I love this statement that you gave to me. It says, we stand and mill around, lamenting anguish, angry, and disengaged. And in that inertia, we fail to do our duty as citizens.
Yes.
That's pretty profound.
Well, it gets me some evil emails, but that's all right. And then I go ahead and say, we need to do these things. But there's a reason why police have been made the bad guy, because they are the one force in society that are probably collectively able to withstand pressure if it was to boil over. But there's so many responsible. I'm thinking on the way down here this morning, I see all these cars coming and going for. They're all responsible people. Most of them are working people, they have families, they worry, they do the same thing. So we're not being overrun. So if you want to change the world, how can you do it? Well, you find a way to make everybody believe that you're right and the rest of us are wrong. And the police are under attack. I met with a new Farmington chief, nice man, and another guy that's socially connected. He understands it. Great choice. And chief, he said, as chief of police, I got to fill some vacancy. He's still struggling. State police, they're abandoning. When I was a trooper in the 60s, I had Heartland, Maine, Palmyra, Todd's Corner, part of Pittsburgh, and 24/7, 2 days off. And I loved it. Today you can't, I don't see a trooper. And I see the colonel has just removed part of Penobscot County.
Because he has nobody there.
Nobody there. He's told the sheriff, you cover it. And the sheriff says, well, I don't have a budget for that. Sheriff in our county is often covering because the revolving this week, next week, they say we don't have anybody this week. So he picked it up and did it because you can't.
Do you think, this is just the drug epidemic that we have, where people, someone coming from away, is part because they know that we just don't have the coverage, our police coverage up here like we should have?
No.
It's just an off-the-wall question. Because
partly, but I think the drug epidemic's out of control. When we used to do education and training and all this stuff. I don't see that much of it. It's being done, but look at, what is it called, vaping?
Yeah, and it makes cigarettes.
It's continually rising up, and these are people that don't know better.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't understand with 20, 30, 40 years, that's going to hurt you bad. But so somebody's got, I think it's the state's got to take responsibility. I don't see it happening, but maybe I don't see it, that's all. So
and you hit on the other part of it is that if our police officers are short, and I mean, we don't have enough, the training they can do gets minimalized because instead of training, we need somebody on the street.
Or you pay overtime.
And if you don't keep them up to speed with what the new thoughts are, they're in deep trouble.
Yeah, the demand for training, you know, to be a viable domestic violence, substance abuse, we have training for substance abuse or mental health, but it's temporary. You get there and you try to maintain it, manage it until proper help arrives. That's the issue in some cases. But small agencies, you know, like Wilton, where I live, 5 officers and a chief. She just hired a retired lieutenant to do some investigation. Yeah. That's great. But she does not have enough resources to do the job. Combine her with 2 or 3 other small towns, and you suddenly begin to see a change.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. That's exactly what I told the selectmen the other night, is that you guys, because I suspect I won't be there anymore, as a select person, are going to have to deal with how you deal with your police department. Do you end up combining it, say, between Farmington, Wilton, and Jay? Because those are the 3 big, well, they're the 3 police departments here in Rangeley. That's the only 4 we have. and with the county, so that we can get better coverage, and the synergies that take place as a result of that give you kind of at least the enforcement side of the model you just described. And if you bring in Evergreen mental health services into that and other counseling, you have that model that you've talked about. It's the regionalization of our police force. And that's ultimately, I think, where we're going to end up. Yeah,
and the reason I got assigned to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department was 500,000 population, 1,500 sworn officers at the time, and I was able to reestablish research planning and analysis. And we used geographic information, GIS, and we worked neighborhood by neighborhood to this community problem-oriented policing. That's key words: community, everybody, problems-oriented policing. And we worked with people to address problems, identify them, describe them, do the research, everything. We turned crime and violence around, improved quality of life, and I used the most poor, desperate community of all. The folks with the means didn't need this, but stakeholders got involved. The city merged into this model. It changed my life. I'm serious. I'm still preaching it today. And a chief of police came in after the one that replaced the chief that did this, and he was, oh, we're going back to enforcement. We're going to arrest these. And he went on and on. And it went right back to what it was.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
But Chief Nowicki formed partnerships. Charles Dean and I, Charlie was a professor at the university, we wrote a thing on the use of social workers in policing. I'll send it to you because it was a model. We didn't hire them, but it worked. The state changed, the legislature changed it so that was a workable solution. And just a very, very quick story. An officer went to public housing, young officer, just out of the academy, off by himself now. And the woman that called was a young woman with 2 children, public housing. She was black, 2 children black. He was a white officer. She said, there's 2 idiots out back shooting at each other. He got there and he said, I'm so-and-so. And he looked down and there were 2 little children clinging to this young lady's. He said, are you married? What a stupid thing to say, but his prejudice came out, or his whatever. So we used to survey everybody all the time. She wrote on the margins on the back. So the captain of that district called, can I come see you? And he did. And he got the officer and her to talk. He became the best community officer I've ever seen. He'd get out of his car, he'd talk to people. You'd see him out there with, people loved him and he loved them, and he's white and most of them were.
Because he listened to them.
He listened to him, he understood. She said, I'm not in this condition because I want to be.
Yeah.
He thought everybody was in public because they were on the door. They weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't.
Yeah.
So, but we got to get us out of the bubble and into the public.
Well, this has been phenomenal. Richard, you'll have to come back on again because we're already out of time.
Are we really?
Yeah, it goes. This is. I mean, you're hitting a subject, so we'll reschedule. Maybe come back on in April or late March to do this, to continue this conversation, because this is very important, and some of the examples you give. So, as always, brother.
Have you had some police and other people in sometime?
I've had both chiefs in,
Good.
and the county sheriff. I've had all 3 of them in to come in and talk, and it's basically time for me to get them to come back in and update what's going on. But I know Ken Charles from his previous career, and I know Chief Nichols very well, and then Heidi. Of course, I know Heidi well because I used to call her at midnight when she was a dispatcher to tell her that there was a problem at the mill.
Oh yeah.
And my Heidi stories I could tell, but thank you. That was great.
I appreciate that. Yes.
So
that's good.
We'll schedule again. So thanks for tuning in to Talkin Maine. That flew by, but we need to continue to have this conversation, and we will. See you next time.